I posted the YouTube on the subject of direct experience in communication among the people. The communication is not in the typical sense through words, but there's more to it, as if we all connect to the core of our being, which is unusual because mind by itself is owned by someone, so to speak, in the brain, and that's what we play. But as a part of our exploring life, going through various experiences, one of the experiences called synchronicity. I didn't know this for a while, but the term synchronicity is coined by Carl Jung, and he says synchronicity is a meaningful coincidence in time, a psychic factor which is independent of space and time. There are more to it if we look into this Wikipedia, and there's even a book called Synchronicity, which I haven't read. But instead of studying further, I just want to capture the point connected to the other post on direct experience I did just recently. This idea of synchronicity, many people start to talk, and my view on this is that especially when we are in the organization sharing ideas and moving forward in some direction, whether it's the sports game like a soccer or music or painting. Well, painting may be more individual, but there may be like an impressionist working together, exploring some idea, but they may have some shared sense of how to explore with the idea of impressionist, which then became a term to characterize, and you can call that Zen is in such a category of how we may be possibly communicate the essence of our being. It sounds like a heavy duty word to express what's the essence of our being. But still, if you're spiritually inclined, or if you're to figure out who you are and how to overcome difficulties and find a meaning in living life, there may be something very core of our being that can be shared in various forms. In Zen, which have been my interest of many years, there are various ways, but what triggered me to talk about the subject of synchronicity related to Zen or direct experience is the book I just opened, done by Mihoko Okamura, who spent time with Daisetz, and Shizuteru Ueda, a professor at the Kyoto University, I believe, and they wrote a book about Daisetz, who is Daisetz Suzuki, and in there various pointers to talk about this Zen and synchronicity, or direct experience, flow state, zone experience, and synchronicity in terms of relating to the communication among people. Or you can even call that synchronicity is the event happening underneath our mind realm, as explained by this quantum physics and all that. We don't need to go in that direction of the technicality, but the point is that when I read this book, and I want to see a few pages, if I can find them, to point that there's such a thing. The page I have it open is about Daisetz talking about the thought on Zen related to Zen and the art of Japanese archery or something. Herrigel is the person, the German person, and Daisetz mentioned this as a foreword. Man is a thinking reed, but his great works are done when he is not calculating and thinking. Childlikeness has to be restored with long years of training in the art of self-forgetfulness. When this is attained, man thinks, yet he does not think. He thinks like showers coming down from the sky. He thinks like the waves rolling on the ocean. He thinks like the stars illuminating the nightly heavens. He thinks like the green foliage shooting forth in the relaxing spring breeze. Indeed, he is the showers, the ocean, the stars, the foliage. It sounds weird, perhaps, for 99% of the population on Earth. That may be an exaggeration. But I can see that phrase point out what this synchronicity is, that in this case, he is one with that phenomena. So there is some connection of the events happening in him. And for him to write this as a foreword for that book, Herrigel's book, remind me of the synchronicity. And in this book, there are a bunch of examples. I don't know if I can point easily because I didn't mark them what they are. But basically, many people could relate. One of the examples was the conference in London. And that was very interesting that the people who are not as familiar with Zen at the time, when Daisetz was in the 60s, he gave a seminar or lecture, and I can perhaps post some information about it. But that conference and that presentation he made was one of the major events of that conference. Why major event? Because people felt something resonating to Daisetz's expression, and I can post this information in the description for this video. The other one was the Eric Fromm, and Daisetz and a bunch of people got together, maybe 50 of them, 30 of them, I don't know, but they spent time with Daisetz, and through that time, whether it's week or whatever, they have communicated at a different frequency, so to speak, pointing the idea of the synchronicity. There are other incidents, maybe I can think of some other examples from this book, but I just flipped through that, and my sense of synchronicity is also interesting because this is a book I read many years ago, and when I opened this book, which I haven't opened up for many years, maybe 15 years, everything's come back, resonating with me. And that's exactly the sense of synchronicity in my direct experience beyond word. I think Mihoko-san or Okamura-san, who spent time with Daisetz, who said after Daisetz passed away, he came back to the house they used to live in Kamakura. And her point there, I remember vividly, is that she realized that the garden there is nothing different from before. And she said she noticed that everywhere she sees and feels was Daisetz living, so to speak, in presence. And there's nothing different, but there's that sense of, let's call it resonance or synchronicity, whatever the term is, that she felt. And I'm just pointing that might also indicate the sense of something profound that may be not easy to find in the universe in our mind and brain, but down deep, it's connection to the root of who we are as direct experience that we may possess. And in that sentence of what I quoted, let's see, I think he used the word childlikeness and self-forgetfulness. I mentioned about forgetting self in the previous video on direct experience, quoting Dogen. Forgetfulness beyond the norm of our mind functioning when we are purely awake and connect to the root, the source of who we are. That's, to me, is forgetfulness. And my sense is that as much as Carl Jung talked about the synchronicity, which the book I haven't read yet, but by knowing what I have studied, not a lot, but about Jung's work, and even I know a story of Daisetz talking with Jung and have left some comment, which I'm not going to go into detail, but I see the connection. There's a difficulty always when we use the word because of the interpretation of the word for each person is different. But like I mentioned in the previous video on direct experience, which is like a zone and flow state experience, and in the realm of not as much individual, but the individually connected the source. And if everybody and everything else has the source connected, with the source being, let's call it the law of the universe, whatever the term, or Buddha nature, it doesn't matter, then at certain level of frequency or the state of mind, or no mind, it's a better way because of the self-forgetfulness, we can find that. And if that is found, as I mentioned in the previous video, there's a unique communication that we can develop and find and resonate. And that gives us a sense of aliveness. I call it waku waku sense. That is coming out of like a spring water from the core of our being. To me, that's my sense of synchronicity, or pure awareness, connected at the root level. And I believe, as I mentioned in the previous video, if we have the sense of the, let's call it the mission as a human being, to explore our existence at the purest, at the root level, then we can communicate. And that's a wonderful thing to have. And for me to be able to say this from this little book, just reminding me and connecting with the thought and the person, Okamura-san, Ueda-san, Daisetz, Jung, Eric Fromm, Christmas, Humphreys, and those shared Daisetz's story in London conference. There may be something that we can identify and connect and find the meaning in what we do to live a life. It's probably is unclear if we use our mind, but childlikeness, as Daisetz mentioned, be open and look at the world as if that's the new beginning that you feel, smelling the rose, clouds, as he said. What was it? He became the ocean, the showers, the foliage, the spring breeze, and all of that. There's some identity in there that we all have, and connecting to that, to me, is the notion of synchronicity. And what's the point of this? this beyond words, if this experience is energizing us, and that's the sense of blissfulness, happiness in a different realm, and the connection to the source, and the view of the world, how we live, can be seen as connecting to that source as much as everything has that. And that's an eternal life, if you want to call it like that. Thank you.